our home, incubator of life, through our lines.
Hello, this is Luminousz Star. Welcome to the channel. All of my current subscribers, thank you guys and gals so much for being my stars. I also want to thank you for your subscription. If this is your first time visiting Luminousz Star, welcome to the channel. Should you become a new subscriber or a part of our Star family, please don't forget to click that notification bell. That way, every video and every vlog that comes out, you'll be the first to know. Today's video, unresolved trauma of narcissistic parents and or grandparents, might have exposed you to early adverse childhood experiences. Please check the description box below for further details to today's video. Please like and or share today's video. Topics of discussion: the birth of the identified patient, transgenerational trauma, and exposure to early adverse childhood experiences. Second topic, adult children of narcissistic parents and or grandparents who suffer layers of trauma due to symptoms of post-traumatic stress injury often have a complex origin. Next topic, narcissistic parents and or grandparents can act as a catalyst, while adult children of narcissistic parents can act as a catalytic converter of transgenerational trauma. And of course, the final topic will be tools, references, and resources, of which you can find in the description box below. Identified patient within a dysfunctional family. Please check the description box below for further details to the site. Transgenerational trauma is trauma that is transferred from the first generation of trauma survivors to the second and further generations of offspring of the survivors via complex post-traumatic stress disorder mechanisms. First point, should there have been any trauma or painful experiences that narcissistic grandparents or parents have survived, it is possible that the aftermath was passed on to the next generation by way of transgenerational trauma. Next point, if the aftermath of trauma has been passed on to the next generation, narcissistic grandparents and or parents have been exposed to or have experienced the trauma. As a result, their offspring might become exposed to early adverse childhood experiences such as narcissistic abuse, dysfunctional behavior patterns, and symptoms associated with trauma. Symptoms associated with trauma are shock, denial or disbelief, confusion, difficulty concentrating, anger, irritability, mood swings, anxiety and fear, guilt, shame, and self-blame, withdrawing from others, feeling sad or hopeless, feeling disconnected or numb. As a result of early exposure to adversity during childhood, a child's brain development and functioning can be altered. If you're interested in taking a look at this chart here, you can find the link in the description box below. Next point, the birth of an identified patient or IP child can become the reality due to narcissistic grandparents and parents who sometimes unconsciously pass on the aftermath of their trauma and or unresolved pain to their children by selecting a particular child within the dysfunctional family to scapegoat. The personality structure of the narcissistic parents and or grandparents are usually the most invalidating to the child who has been selected to play the dysfunctional role of scapegoat. It might not be surprising that these personality structures often clash. Symptoms of complex PTSD. Experiencing childhood neglect. Experiencing other types of abuse early in life. Next symptom, experiencing domestic abuse. Next, experiencing human trafficking. Next, being a prisoner of war. The last symptom of complex PTSD is living in a region affected by war. For further reading, please check the description box below for the link that you see here. Next point, narcissistic parents and grandparents who have survived pain and or trauma from their past can and often do demonstrate behavior patterns associated with trauma, such as addiction, depression, anxiety, mismanagement of anger, personality deficits, dehumanization, and a lack of interpersonal skills, as well as empathy. Okay, so a lot of narcissists and cluster B personality types, we often hear of them behaving or having such behavior patterns as these: personality deficits, dehumanization, and a lack of interpersonal skills, as well as empathy or lacking empathy. However, if we're talking about narcissistic parents and or grandparents who have actually suffered some form of trauma in their past, they can pass on the aftermath of that trauma to their offspring. And they can also show these particular signs here associated with trauma. Thus, besides the exposure to their parents' traumatic stories and their trauma-related acquired behavior patterns, these offspring may have a biological vulnerability to traumatic stress and PTSD transmitted to them from their parents. Here's the site below. Please check the description box for further reading. Next point. Symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress injury often is a result of layers upon layers of trauma that go back for years within an individual's life. There are some narcissistic parents and or grandparents, as well as their children and grandchildren, who have this experience. Regardless, there aren't any excuses for narcissistic parents and grandparents who choose to project unresolved trauma and pain onto their children and grandchildren. So no excuses, okay? Even though we all know, well, some of us, we have grown to know and learn that narcissists and those who have cluster B personalities in our lives, yeah, they make excuses upon excuses for why they may treat us a particular way or why they may behave a certain way. No excuses. Okay, I say that, no excuses, because we all have free will to choose regardless of what type of challenges we have. Okay, now let's face it, some people will debate this. Some people will say, well, narcissists and cluster B personalities, they can't help but to do what they do. Well, no, again, this is debatable. There are no excuses for narcissists and cluster B personalities to behave and treat people the way that they do. They often make excuses for doing this. And I say it is not a good idea to allow this to happen, because this means a person can come very close to being an enabler of a narcissist or cluster B personality type. Let's move forward. Exposure to early adverse childhood experiences.
Box below. All right, first point. The brain structure, hormonal system, immune system, DNA reading, and body development of children are adversely affected by early exposure to high adversity and toxic amounts of stress. The human body remembers trauma, while people do many things to try and forget the events that cause trauma due to exposure to adversity. So basically, we do a lot of things, whether it's constructive or destructive, to forget the traumatic, painful events that happen in our lives. So if a child is exposed very early to high adversity that may cause him or her stress, that's going to cause them some health issues, as they due to the toxic amounts of stress, a child's DNA reading, their brain structure, as well as their immune system can be affected by that. Okay? Let's move forward. All right, next point. There are several health issues that are more likely to occur in people who have a history of experiencing early and repeated stress activation due to exposure to high adversity, which may have resulted in childhood trauma. The flight or fight activation. becomes maladaptive rather than remaining adaptive. With the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, the flight or fight activation becomes maladaptive rather than remaining adaptive, which could lead to poor coping strategies to deal with the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. When a person is under a lot of stress, he or she more than likely is not going to be able to focus. They're probably going to be worried about a lot of things. So when it comes to a dysfunctional relationship with a narcissist and a personality, no doubt that person is going to be highly stressed. They're going to be overly worried about the shenanigans of the narcissist and a personality. Not to say that there's nothing to be concerned about. However, the narcissist and cluster personality, they like to keep people on edge. They like to keep people full of fear and anxiety. So when you add all that up, when a person is dealing with the shenanigans, when they're dealing with the toxic tactics of the narcissist, he or she is trying to obtain the source supply. They're doing a lot of diabolical things to do it. They're trying to make sure that their false self-image survives and thrives. And sometimes that's at your expense. So the flight or fight activation is going to be maladaptive. In other words, it's going to work against the person. So for instance,
Next point, narcissistic parents and grandparents can sometimes act as a catalyst for passing on the aftermath of trauma and unresolved pain, while their children and or grandchildren can act as a catalytic converter, recognizing in order to interrupt the dysfunctional behavior patterns associated with trauma. As adults, those offspring can choose not to pass on the dysfunctional family legacy onto the next generation. So like a catalytic converter, the offspring or the grandchildren and the children of narcissistic parents and or grandparents can recognize the patterns of dysfunction within their own families, and they can choose as adults to interrupt the dysfunctional behavior patterns associated with trauma. But not only that, they can interrupt the dysfunctional behavior patterns of their narcissistic parents and or grandparents within themselves. Okay, what am I saying? As a child, if you have narcissistic parents and or grandparents, more than likely you have adopted unconsciously some of their behavior patterns which are associated with trauma, such as anxiety, depression, mismanaged anger. Okay, these are all associated with trauma. The narcissistic parent and or grandparents, if they have suffered some sort of trauma in their past and it goes unresolved, they can show signs or behavior patterns associated with trauma. This can be passed on due to transgenerational trauma to the offspring. As an adult child of a narcissist and a cluster personality, he or she can choose to interrupt the dysfunctional behavior patterns associated with trauma. They can also interrupt the dysfunctional behavior patterns associated within their dysfunctional family. Okay, of course, starting with their narcissistic parents and or grandparents. In other words, they can choose to not pass on the dysfunctional family legacy. Simply put, adult children of narcissistic parents and or grandparents, they can choose to not pass on the dysfunctional family legacy. Okay, they can choose to not pass it on to the next generation and beyond. This is something to celebrate. Let's move forward. First tool, demonstrate your personal growth by continuing to work and build your support base. Breaking the cycle of transgenerational trauma and narcissistic abuse within your family is cause for celebration. Okay, let's move on to tool number 2.
Relief to find that there are options available to you that can help you thrive forward. No doubt. Let's go ahead to the second tool. Build a support base. This might be overwhelming to some due to how accustomed you might be to your method of coping with the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. No question. If a person, we all kind of gravitate towards what's familiar, right? So if we're coping with the adverse effects of narcissistic abuse, if we're coping with the aftermath of narcissistic abuse, we tend to stick with the same method or the same program. Those coping skills may not be the best. So if you have a support base, if you're going to see a life coach, if you're going to see a counselor, these individuals, if they understand your plight and also combine with some expertise and knowledge, right? They can help you build your support base. They can help you by providing you with some coping skills that can help you thrive forward. And also, they can encourage you to become a little bit more knowledgeable about narcissistic abuse and its aftermath.
Third tool, consider incorporating a healthier lifestyle into your support base. When you feel better, your world may start to look better to you. The weight of hopelessness, despondency, and deep resentment can be lifted as you choose to celebrate that your life has purpose, regardless of any signs of trauma within your family. Critical question number 1. Are you here only to supply narcissists and/or cluster personality types at your own expense? What factors within your reality support your answer? Okay, so sometimes we can succumb to despondency, especially dealing with narcissists and/or cluster personality types. Okay, so are you only here to supply them? This is a question that I answered for myself a long time ago. So the answer varies from person to person. And believe it or not, this particular question is probably not that easy to answer, especially if you have been dealing with narcissists and/or cluster personalities within your family since your childhood. A lot of children who have narcissistic parents and/or grandparents, they experience what is known as enmeshment with their narcissistic mom and dad. Not only do they experience enmeshment, but they also may experience trauma bonding. This makes that tie or toxic tie more complex and more challenging to turn away from. So when a person asks you, are you here only to supply narcissists and/or cluster personality types at your own expense? The answer may not be as simple as one may think. Not only that, to answer this question may take a little time to answer it. This is understandable. Again, when a person has been dealing with narcissists and cluster personalities within their own families since childhood, it's understandable why this particular question here may be a little bit complex and challenging to answer. All right, so let's look at the second half of the question. What factors within your reality support your answer? This is when a person can start to look for the contrast. In other words, look for the people who are not cluster personality types who are in your life. It may be a teacher, may be a mentor, it may be some of your friends. They don't have cluster personalities. They don't have a narcissistic personality. So this is where your contrast is. Once you find the contrast within your own life, you can also find some peace, balance, and harmony, even though there may be narcissistic parents and/or grandparents who may still be a part of your life. So what are some of the factors within your reality that support your answer, whatever that answer may be for you? The contrast, again, is the key to the second part of that question. Do you have people in your life that are not cluster personalities and/or narcissists? Not only that, what about you? What are some of your positive qualities or your appealing qualities? Because I'm certain you have some, right? So you can just go ahead and consider those. These are some of the factors within your reality that support your answer, that you are not here only to supply narcissists, whether they're in your family or not. Critical question number 2. Does the concept of forgiving your narcissistic parents and/or grandparents trigger you? Why or why not? Consider emotional integration. All right, so the concept of forgiving, does it trigger you? Believe it or not, there are a lot of people who have dealt with childhood trauma that find the concept of forgiving the narcissistic parent and/or grandparents a trigger point for them. Some people who have had narcissistic parents and or grandparents, they may feel like they have gone way over and beyond loving the narcissistic parents and or grandparents. So whenever someone else asks them about the concept of forgiving the narcissistic parents and or grandparents, that person may feel triggered. So why or why not does this serve as a trigger point for you? Consider emotional integration. Emotional integration helps you to tap into your own emotions and feel them without judging yourself. Emotional integration helps you to find yourself again. It also helps you to give yourself permission to grieve and to express what you have experienced. If you have narcissistic parents and or grandparents, no doubt you have experienced trauma and heartache, anger, and some of everything, right? But the bottom line is this: you have gone through quite the ordeal. So it's not surprising that the concept of forgiving your narcissistic parents and or grandparents may serve as a trigger point for you. Try not to judge yourself for this. To forgive or not to forgive is a personal choice. Unfortunately, there are some who are pressured to forgive the narcissistic parents and or grandparents. Sometimes this is due to others within his or her family who believe in a certain religious doctrine, or they may follow a particular religion. This is only part of the reason why some have been pressured into forgiving the narcissist and or cluster personality type within their family. There are other reasons, but I just thought I would name that one because that's one of the most common reasons why a person who has suffered trauma is pressured to forgiving. Let's move forward. Critical question number 3. Currently, what are your coping strategies whereas it pertains to transgenerational trauma within your family? Are any of your strategies effective? So take a look at your strategies for coping with transgenerational trauma. Some of those strategies actually do work. Some of the strategies may not work, may be self-defeating. So the key is balance. Balance what you think with what you feel. One of the ways to express what you think with what you feel is to have a support base that serves as a constructive outlet for you. The narcissist and a cluster personality, they're not going to support you in your efforts to thrive forward and heal past narcissistic abuse. So your coping strategies, the more effective they are, the better for you. Currently, if you have a support base and you are learning and working some very effective coping strategies, this can help you deal with transgenerational trauma. And this will also help you to let go of some strategies that may not be very effective. What are strategies that are ineffective? Self-medication is one ineffective strategy for coping and dealing with transgenerational trauma. Another ineffective coping strategy is to go into denial about the reality. In other words, you're choosing to wear the rose-colored glasses. I did a video about balancing working your support base while at the same time you're choosing to invest in a dysfunctional family headed by a narcissist or a cluster personality. This is very difficult to do. Speaking from experience, I can tell you, you're going to be pulled in different directions. On one hand, you're going to your support group. You may be going to a counselor. You may have a mentor or a life coach that's helping you to exercise effective coping strategies to deal with transgenerational trauma. So on one hand, again, you are doing everything you can to thrive forward and heal from narcissistic abuse. On the other, you are still choosing to wear the rose-colored glasses because you are still having an active dysfunctional relationship with dysfunctional family headed by narcissistic parents and or grandparents. So critical question number 3, I think, is the highlightable question. Let's move forward. References and resources. You can find the references and resources in the description box below. I'm Luminousz Star. I want to thank everyone for joining me today or tonight. And of course, wherever you are right now, I wish you the very best love possible. Stay tuned for more vlogs and stay tuned for more videos. Hi, I'm Luminousz Star. I want to thank everyone for joining me today or tonight. And of course, wherever you are right now, I wish you the very best love possible. Everyone who's decided to join the Luminousz Star family, welcome to Luminousz Star. And please don't forget to select the notification bell. That way, all the videos that come out, you'll be the first to know. On that note, just a friendly reminder, every Sunday and every Thursday, there are new videos that are coming out. So I want to thank everyone, my stars especially. Thank you guys and gals so much. And stay tuned for more vlogs and stay tuned for more videos.